Hello and welcome. You're watching To The Point. Once again, serious and worrying ceasefire violations are occurring both across the line of control and the international border in Kashmir. Both sides accuse the other of unwarranted provocation. So in part 2, we ask, what exactly is happening? How should we understand this development and what can we do about it? But first, the government's ordinance amending the Land Acquisition Act has met with a sharply polarized response. Industrialists and many economists have welcomed the amendment, but the political opposition and several activists are sharply critical. So today we examine the main amendments and ask, are they justified or is the criticism valid? That's the first debate tonight. And now joining me to discuss the Land Acquisition Amendment Ordinance is the former Secretary General of FICCI and a renowned economist, Rajiv Kumar, BJP leader Sudhanshu Mittal, one of the conveners of the National Alliance of People's Movements, Madhuresh Kumar, and Congress spokesperson, Ajoy Kumar. Rajiv Kumar, the ordinance amending the Land Acquisition Act does away with the consent clause and the social impact assessment requirement for land for 5 specified purposes, and they are industrial corridors, PPP projects, rural infrastructure, affordable housing and defense. Now, as an independent person, in your eyes, is this a justified amendment or is it designed to benefit a specific class of corporates and therefore ipso facto discriminatory? Which is it?
It's a required amendment, and it doesn't really affect a certain section of the corporate world, because the PPP projects, as I mentioned, the land ownership remains vested in the government, and therefore it's not as if it's going to play into the hands of the land grabbers, etc., etc. On the industrial corridors, it's quite clear that if you want to have a project like the DMIC and you had to wait for the 100% or the 80% consensus of the owners, the same sort of fate would have happened to these projects as has happened to POSCO, where a $12 billion project has been hanging for the last 11 years because about 150 families won't have anything of it. And finally, Karan, Section 40 of the previous act, of the original act, is called an urgency clause, where it had said that all of these requirements would in any case can be done away with if the government felt that there was an urgency in the issue of land acquisition. So it is not as if this is something which is completely new.
Okay.
It was already there in the act. The only thing that has been done is to specify those 5 sectors where this will not be required because of the likely delays and that will be caused because these were quite open-ended.
Ajoy Kumar, yesterday your party spokesperson, your colleague Abhishek Singhvi, said to this very program that the amendments to the ordinance are designed to benefit corporate entities, and as he seemed to allude, particularly those that are seen by Congress to be close to the Modi government. On what grounds does your party make that claim?
You know, Karan, first of all, if you look at the exceptions, they have made exceptions to everything possible. So you have hospitals, you have hotels, you have tourism, and I'm surprised with what Mr. Rajiv has said, you know, that it would not, from his perspective, that public-private partnership doesn't impact, you know, it still remains ownership with the government. I mean, you tell me which public-private partnership where the private sector has got the control of the property has ever gone back. So that's all language camouflage. But the whole spirit, what's interesting is the chairman of the parliamentary committee was Ms. Sumitra Mahajan. It was debated for 2 years, 14 hours of parliamentary debate. And at that time, the committee felt that there should be no role for public-private participation and for the private sector. Okay. The Congress government included that, saying 80% for the private sector, 70% approval for the public-private participation.
Can I interrupt you? Can I interrupt you? Don't blind me with details. Just answer one specific question. Why do you believe that this amendment is designed to benefit corporates? Give me that specifically.
Because the exceptions are everything. Social infrastructure project, everything under the sun is included. You tell me what is excluded, and there is no clear definition of what is excluded. So what happens is you have come back to crony capitalism. You have left discretion with the civil servants, who, by the way, cannot be prosecuted at all.
Okay.
So the spirit of the law, you have removed the heart because you have left discretion. No, and Karan, last point. There is no specific, you have left the whole thing. You can acquire land for anything. Secondly, there is no recourse. If you don't use the land, it doesn't go back.
Dr. Kumar, let's take these points one by one. Let's take the points one by one. I'll come to all of them one by one, but let's take them in a structured way so the audience can follow. Otherwise, they'll be confused with detail just pouring out. Sudhanshu Mittal, the original bill required 70% consent for landowners for PPP projects and 80% for private companies. Now, after your amendments, if private companies are involved in defense, rural infrastructure or affordable housing, or if they choose to locate themselves in what you call industrial corridors, they will not have to abide by the consent clause or the social impact clause. And I put it to you, they therefore will be clearly benefiting. And therefore, when Congress claims that selective companies in these 5 fields will benefit, they are correct.
Karanji, if you rightly recollect, the entire issue of crony capitalism came from the escalation in the cost of housing in townships which were built by private entities, or industries which were land acquired for industries or land acquired for SEZs and all that. These were the fundamental acts which raised the entire issue of compensation and crony capitalism. Let me read out, for the benefit of my friend, the exceptions.
No, just a moment. I'm going to stop you there. I don't want you to read anything out. You aren't addressing the question I put to you. I'm not talking of crony capitalism. That's a different thing. I'm saying to you, let me finish.
When it comes to a private sector company.
Let me finish.
I'm saying something. Private sector company doing a project for national security, I'm sure that it is a welcome amendment. If the exemption is for the purpose of national security, surely it should be granted. If the purpose of exemption is for defense, it should certainly be granted.
What about the exemptions? What about the exemptions in industrial corridors, which would be a large swathe of territory for all sorts of companies, whether they are defense or not? Those could be mass production companies for consumer durables, right? That's an exemption granted. Now, that is an exemption that benefits private enterprise, possibly at the cost of farmers, possibly at the cost of other interests. No. That's the opposition criticism.
The industrial corridor is a contiguous large stretch of land along for a corridor to be developed as an integrated industrial township with housing and all. It's a government project. It is not an individual who is developing an industrial corridor or a business house or a capitalist entity which is developing it. So when the government plans an integrated industrial corridor, it takes care of the social requirements of that area, it takes care of the commercial requirements, it takes care of the housing requirements, the affordable, it takes care of everything. All right. So that is the reason. And
I'm going to stop you there. I'm going to stop you there, Mr. Mittal. I'm going to stop you there. I want to bring in Madhuresh Kumar to get an opposite view to yours. And let me put it like this, Mr. Kumar. There's no doubt that in defense, in rural infrastructure, in affordable housing, or even in industrial corridors, private sector companies will benefit. But those companies are clearly doing work, producing goods that benefit the economy or benefit national security or benefit both. Therefore, if they get easier access to land and market, not cheaper, just easier access, then that is a benefit to the economy and to the country. Why then should it be denied to them? The country benefits as a whole.
Nobody is opposed to the country development, but I think the issue why after 115 years we got a new act, it was precisely because there were 4 reasons. Forcible land acquisition, no consent, and compensation. Even these 3 points, I'm saying you want your land.
Compensation remains the same.
Compensation remains the same, but it's about taking consent or not. If it's my land under constitution, then do I have a right over it or not? If it's about country's development, then farmers constitute at least 50% of the people are dependent on it.
Can I put this to you? The country has defense needs that require urgent meeting.
Yes.
If you only meet them through the urgency clause, then defense cantonments are left out, then nuclear installations are left out. Now, those are going to benefit the whole country. There are areas where the public good requires that it get prominence and precedence over individual good. That's why you forcibly acquire. You're still paying the full compensation.
I agree, but
you're doing away with the consent.
But this act is not about defense. This leaves everything. The 29 sectors here.
Well, it's about
This is
affordable,
29
it's about
it's not
affordable
about
housing.
affordable housing, it's about SEZ. CAG report, look at the SEZs, what they did with it.
No, just a moment.
The public
Just a moment.
land they have
just a
taken
moment.
across
Let's not go into SEZ reports because that's a different thing.
Yeah.
It's about affordable housing that helps the poor. It's about defense that helps the country as a whole.
Electrification, private hotel, private hospitals.
Private hotels are actually out.
It's a private hospital is there, private educational institutions.
Who goes to hospitals but
they're
the
not
ill?
included.
Hospitals are for the ill.
But who can afford it? Who can go to Fortis? They are not even providing the 25% which is needed for them to give to the poor people.
Let me bring in
private education.
Let me bring in Rajiv Kumar. Rajiv Kumar, you were defending these amendments. You argued that in fact they are not discriminatory. They are needed for a whole range of development requirements. One possible problem is the following. This ordinance permits multi-crop irrigated land to be acquired for these 5 purposes. Now that could A, adversely impact on agriculture, and secondly, it could affect the interest of farmers. Is that one exemption that shouldn't have been included?
No, I actually completely disagree with that, Karan, simply because the food security provision is not going to be had by sort of taking out the multi-crop land from this provision, because if you look at the yields that India has today in agriculture, they are about 1/5 of the world standard. Secondly, if you apply that clause, and I had written about that, you would actually take out about 43%, about 152 million hectares of land from urbanization and industrialization, which falls in the Indo-Gangetic plain, which is UP, Bihar and West Bengal. Now all of these lands are multi-cropped and irrigated, and you are actually saying then that these districts and these areas will never get industrialized or urbanized. Now that is, and this is where the farmers are wanting to move out. That is where they're wanting to sell their land. So the question is simply that this multi-crop admission, and I opposed it even in the act earlier. But just one last thing, you see, which is that
don't bring up everything. Mr. Kumar, don't bring up everything at one go. Let's take it in a structured fashion. Otherwise, audiences won't follow the argument. This is a very technical issue where, out of respect for the audience, we should make it easier and simpler for them rather than complicated and difficult. Sudhanshu Mitchell, I want to put to you a second potential problem, and it's the very thing you were talking about a moment ago, the so-called industrial corridors. Now, the problem is that term industrial corridor is not defined in India either by the government or by law. As the Business Standard today points out, the Delhi-Mumbai corridor, just to take that as an example, is 1,483 kilometers long with a band of 150 kilometers on either side. That alone amounts to a total of 4,44,900 square kilometers.
14% of land area of India.
There you are.
That's the influence area. 17% of India's population we are talking about.
Let me finish. If you have 5 or 6 such industrial corridors in the country, which clearly the government 40%. Plans, a large swathe of India will suddenly be exempt from the consent clause as well as the social impact clause. Is that really justified? Surely you need to more narrowly define the term industrial corridor.
First, again I am saying, the compensation packet was the criticality of the Land Acquisition Act. Why? Because earlier the compensation paid for the land was 1/5 of the cost of the market price. Today, you are having twice the market price when it comes to the urban area and 4 times the market price when it comes to rural area.
Mr. Mittal, I'm interrupting you. I'm interrupting you for a simple reason. We know that the compensation is not altered. The same level of compensation as envisaged in the 2013 Act will continue to be paid. What has altered are 2 things. You first of all undermine the principle of prior informed consent by doing away with the social impact clause. And secondly, and this may be worse, when you do away with the social impact clause, how do you work out the compensation for non-land owners who are also affected? Because often there are non-land owners whose livelihood is affected when land is acquired. Those are 2 deep concerns you aren't talking about.
See, the owners of the land are getting adequately compensated by way of employment, by way of annual compensation, and by way of market price. So saying that market price would not be there. The fundamental to this act is that you will be paid twice or 4 times the market price. So financial compensation is not an issue which is there for anybody. The issue is opportunity cost. If you are going to have a social impact and a consent clause which will delay a project of say by 10 years or 5 years, is this good for the country?
Okay.
If there is a composite work plan by the government for development.
Let Madhuresh Kumar answer that question. He's making a very interesting point. He's saying the social impact clause will simply... I'll come to you in a moment's time. He's saying the social impact clause will simply add to the time that it takes for a project to happen, probably making the project unviable, putting off investors, holding up development, as a result of which holding up jobs and holding up the possibility of farmers moving from farming to urban living, which many want to do. How do you answer that key point?
Well, I would only say that if it's about sabka saath, sabka vikas, okay? So if, say, my consent, it's my land. If I want to move out, do I have a choice or not in this independent country? Is it only about everybody else?
Hang on a second.
Why should I do that?
People who want to move out are not stopped by this act. It's the opposite.
No, but the point is that you are not letting me decide. If it's only about money, I want to decide how much will I send my flat for. If my house is being acquired or your house is being acquired, will anybody accept this fact that the government will compulsorily acquire and not for defense, but for a private corporate house? Why should I agree to that?
But that private corporate house, just before you stop, you know, when you say private corporate house, you make it sound like filthy capital and horrible capitalists. The truth is, those people create jobs. Those jobs are needed so that people can have a better life. If you don't have jobs, you won't have a better life. Why not say that this is being done not for private capital, but to create public jobs from which poor Indians will benefit? That's another way of saying it.
I completely agree. There is need for industry. There is need for everything. The point is, if you require 500 acres for setting up a factory, why are you acquiring 5,000 acres?
But you're not necessarily...
I think, and that's where the important clause, the social impact assessment clause, social impact clause was exactly about that. Looking at how much land is needed, how much irrigated land will be acquired, if there is a land bank available or not. This actually would have reduced the problem. The conflict would have reduced.
Let me bring in the Congress spokesperson, Mr. Kumar. Just a moment, Mr. Mittal. Mr. Mittal, you're interrupting. Sorry. Let me bring in the Congress spokesperson.
Just one second, Sudhanshu.
Mr. Kumar, let me put this to you. Arun Jaitley has written the following. Those who are opposed to it can certainly mandate their parties, state governments, not to use the provisions of the ordinance. Now, clearly, your party in Delhi is opposed to it. But equally clearly, and it's well known, your state governments in Kerala, Karnataka and Assam, just to name those three, are in favor of it. So, where does the Congress party stand? Will you oppose your state governments implementing this ordinance?
Karan, you know,
or will you oppose it?
Now, Karan, you know, there's been a lot of reports saying that, you know, these are the governments who have not seen, these are the governments which are favoring it. I have not seen it in any kind of documentation. But I want to give you a very interesting fact. One of the biggest land owners in this country are the defense and railways. So what, like Mr. Rajiv says, you know, why is crony capitalism is you acquire land along the Delhi-Calcutta highway, you know, as much as you want, sit on it, and then multiply it and give it, you know, for...
The defense and the railways can't be accused of crony capitalism. They're government controlled. How do you accuse the defense and railways of crony capitalism?
What I'm saying is, I'm not saying that. The land bank in this country, there's a huge amount of land bank with the government already. Now, there is no white paper on the available land bank. And what happens is you always seem to have eyes on some poor farmer's land. I'm saying that if it's necessary, do it. But look at your definition of the industrial corridor.
I need to clarify what you're saying, Mr. Kumar, which is why I'm interrupting you. Are you saying to me that, in fact, the government already has sufficient land for rural infrastructure, for defense and for railways and doesn't need to acquire more? Is that what you're saying?
I can add to that.
Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm not saying that. What I'm saying
Sounded as if you were.
No, I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is, first of all, let me complete, Sudhanshu. There is a lot of land bank, unutilized land already available, acquired earlier.
So then you are saying that.
If you want to be fair, what are we doing with those lands? One second, let me complete my statement. The other issue is, why is it why is it that only the farmer's land and everybody's land seems to be, you don't need a social impact assessment survey? Let's imagine we do the same act for acquiring land on the Gurgaon highway. All citizens are same.
Okay.
You need to give the same protection to all citizens of this country, which is entitled to you and me. Why is it that the lowest person, अच्छे दिन तो सबके लिए होना चाहिए?
Well, no, just a moment. Let's not get into phraseology like अच्छे दिन. Let's stick to the actual details of this bill because they're important. Mr. Kumar, I want to bring you in on this question of doing away with the social impact assessment, which many people believe would have two consequences. Firstly, it would undermine the principle of informed prior consent. That is, the social impact assessment was really designed so that people whose land is being acquired, whether they're owners or non-owners but dependent on the land, would have a clear idea. And the second thing you had to do away with was how do you then compensate non-landowners? How do you respond to those two concerns?
Yeah, Karan, the social impact assessment, the way it had been designed in the Act was an open-ended situation. It was expected to give you a report in 2 months, but there was no provision about the fact that whether or not this report, if it's not given in 2 months, what will happen to that. The second thing is that, the whole thing is premised upon the fact of a malintention on part of the government, which is that the government will take land and do something wrong with it, which is something that the entire process of the huge compensation that is going to be paid for, it is not going to be at all now beneficial for government, even if it is the most sort of mal-governed or the corrupt government, for it to buy that land and sit on it because the price that they are paying is too high. And finally, the question is that if there is a land bank available in that area where a project could be built, of course, the government is supposed to be using that land bank rather than acquire fresh land. So the social impact assessment, the entire procedure of it, and the fact that it was an open-ended procedure, and the fact that there was already a section 40 in that original act which did away with it in cases of urgency.
Quite right, you made that point earlier.
That you had to have this section removed for those sectors.
Let me bring in Sudhanshu Mittal. Mr. Mittal, for many people, not all, but for many, the greatest concern is that this phrase industrial corridor is such a loose, undefined phrase, and the amount of land that it could encroach upon and cover is so huge, particularly if you have 5 or 6 such corridors as the government intends to have, that you could actually effectively, completely undermine the whole object of consent and social impact. Why not, therefore, reassure people by narrowly defining industrial corridors so that it doesn't cover a vast swathe and doesn't threaten people? Why not just do that?
Karanji, mass acquisition is history now, because then the cost involved for mass acquisition was peanuts. Today, with the compensation package which is defined in this act, believe me, no government can even think about mass acquisition, let alone trying to create infrastructure not required or which will entail.
It's not the government, it's private companies coming into industrial corridors. Mr. Mittal, it's not the government, it's private companies operating in industrial corridors, particularly corridors like you heard from Madhuresh Kumar that end up covering 14% of India. Narrow that down and you'll do away with a lot of the opposition.
Karanji, no, that's not true. The industrial corridor, along with the railway line, is acquired by the government of India and not by any private individual.
But it's given to them.
Where this entire story of private individuals comes.
It's given to them. I would only like to say that 3 things, and with Mr. Kumar and Mr. Mittal, that did anybody try and implement this law? Did anybody try conduct any social impact in this country anywhere after 2013?
In other words, they're amending
Have you ever
it without
done any time?
You're saying they're amending it without trying it?
Without trying it. 115 years.
The second thing, we're running out of time. The second thing.
Second thing, 80,000 hectares in Maharashtra, the government has land bank acquired under MIDC Act. And they are saying we want to be out of this act because we want to implement DMIC. Number 3, that what happens if everything today, if we will say that we want industry, we want a nuclear power plant in the Central Park in Delhi. Will you allow it?
Well, hang on a second. Now you're becoming a bit ludicrous when you say that.
But I'm saying it's about concept.
You're going to the ludicrous to make a point. That's not fair. No, that's not fair. I'm going to give you the last word, Mr. Ajay Kumar. I'm going to give you, Mr. Ajay Kumar, the last word. And I want to put this to you. Arun Jaitley, in his defense, has pointed out that all the compensation and R&R provisions of the 2013 Act remain intact. The government is simply making it easier to acquire land. It's not making it. Just a moment, Mr. Mittal. The government, Mr. Kumar, is only making it easier to acquire land. It's not making it cheaper. And what Arun Jaitley then says is critical. He says this is the best way of catering for the development needs of the 21st century while still paying 21st century compensation. Many believe this is the right balance to draw. Otherwise, you hold up industry, you hold up jobs, you hold up the prospect of Indian people improving their lives. When you oppose this, you end up opposing development.
No, look, first of all, Karan, Sudhanshu ji and Mr. Rajiv Kumar is saying 4 times compensation, etc. What about in POSCO? Look at the compensation when you go to a place
Kumar,
like Odisha.
Answer my question, we're running out of time. Answer my question, we're running out of time. Answer my question.
And the important, so I'm telling you, so I'm answering it. So why can't you have the social impact assessment, fix a time? You could have brought in those changes. Finish it in 2 months, it's mandatory. You cannot go beyond 2 months. Bring in social impact assessment.
In which case you might have a meaningless social impact.
That would have been a fairer method.
We prefer a meaningless social impact than a meaningful one.
Time for social impact assessment.
Rajiv Kumar, the last word, go ahead.
You fix up a time limit. But if you don't have a social impact...
There is no provision in the Act. If you read that Act, there is no provision to say that if the report is not completed in 2 months, what are the consequences?
6 months to complete that Act.
All right, gentlemen.
So then change
This is, gentlemen, an issue that is deeply contentious. It divides people not just in terms of their ideological attitude to development. It also divides people in terms of their politics. We've tried very hard to have a structured discussion that goes through the different aspects of the different amendments in a logical, structured way. I'm not sure we've actually succeeded, but what we have certainly done is to expose the emotions, the passion, and perhaps the bitter, deep divide that lies behind it. This is, I assure you, a subject on which we will return, and maybe if we can, we'll spend a whole hour discussing this subject next time, because I think it deserves that depth of attention. But for now, we have to take a break.